I thought considering the topic of the video, wearing Joulzey's shirt was appropriate.
Hey everyone, I realized as I was editing this and I had already changed and moved everything around that I forgot to mention this very important part. As I have been thinking about talking about this issue, what has been very important to me is to listen to people from the Black American community that I trust and believe in and who have always been cultural and historical truth tellers when it comes to these kind of things, because despite my own background, which I will get into in this video, I think it's very important for me to shout out Joulzey, whose shirt I wear in this video, and also for Harriet, whose video about Harriet Tubman came out after I finished recording this video. That listening to them, listening to other Black American voices, and just other people who are standing in solidarity like I am with the diaspora, has been so important. And I think as we decide to see Harriet or not, and I think that should be dependent on how you feel personally, and I think, as I said in the video, no one should feel shamed or forced into do it if they feel like it's going against themselves to do so. But I think that it's important that no matter what we decide to do with our dollar, that we stand in solidarity with people who are saying we do not want our history and our images to be commodified by people that do not respect us. And I think despite this 20-minute video, I wanted to make sure that that statement, more than anything, was very clear. And I just had a little bit of a doubt if I made that especially clear. And I'm like, well, I can edit it. So this is this 2-minute disclaimer clarifier. And thank you for listening. And again, I would highly recommend listening and following those two YouTubers. If you do not, I'll make sure to have all that information in the description box below.
Hey guys, as I promised, I am back uploading videos. The Patreon has officially launched, and you will see by the time this video goes up, there will be 2 Patreon exclusives uploaded there. One will be about the TV show Titans, and the other one will be about my feelings on Harley Quinn and sort of her overexposure. I'll save a little bit more details for the end, but just remember to like, subscribe, and comment along. So I made this video because there's a lot of controversy and misinformation surrounding the film Harriet, starring Cynthia Erivo as the titular historical heroine, and it's directed by Casey Lemons, who is the director of Eve's Bayou, one of the most iconic, Black female pieces of cinema out there. And there has been a lot of really bad takes that have sort of belied the actual issues surrounding Cynthia Erivo's casting and why there has been so much backlash to it. And at first I didn't want to talk about it because it would mean opening up a lot of other discussions that I just didn't kind of want to put myself out there at the time for. But then I realized that a really big part of this channel for me has always been about me discussing Blackness and other issues in an honest and genuine way, and that's been how I've met a lot of amazing people and a big part of who I am as a person. And so I realized that if I was going to talk about this issue, I'd rather do it here among y'all than at the Mary Sue, because even though I love my job and I work there, it is a predominantly white site, and I just would rather have these in-home talks outside, but with a space that I am comfortable, with people I'm comfortable talking to about it. So a lot of sites have been saying that the backlash against Erivo is because she's British, and that is not entirely the case. While there are some people who do believe that only American descendants of slaves should be playing this type of character, that is not necessarily my take on it, and I'll explain why towards the end. But overall, there is this issue that Cynthia Erivo is someone who made anti-Black American comments on Twitter by, I believe it was retweeting or liking something by another Nigerian writer, and that was really something that popped up this whole discussion. And to my knowledge, I did a quick Google search, she's never apologized for it or clarified it or anything like that. And because of those, her kind of co-signing those comments, people were really just kind of like, what the fuck, when she was cast to play Harriet Tubman, who is one of the most iconic, Black American historical figures that we have. Me and using the royal we in that sense. Again, I'll explain at the end. And you know, one of the most important Black figures in history, period. If you don't respect the culture of which she comes from, why do you feel like you can play her? And since she as an actress also made her big break and won a Tony for playing Celie in the revival of The Color Purple, you know, she says that she wants to play Serena Williams, who is so Black American. I mean, like, she crip walked in front of the queen, you know, she's 100% that Black American bitch. And Aretha Franklin is someone else who she's in the talks to portray, and it's like, why are you interested in playing these characters if you're not interested in the culture or respect the culture seemingly that she comes from? And this wasn't just something that Black Americans said. I saw a lot of people across the diaspora, you know, I'm of West Indian descent technically, were supporting that because they felt like it was just disrespectful, and so we were all side-eyeing her, and there were just never any apology, and I shouldn't have done it, you know, I move on from it. And I will say that a part of this issue as well is that that piece of the conversation was erased, and it became a narrative about Black British people versus Black Americans that, in my opinion, is 100% being done in bad faith right now. And it's being used as a way to get kind of these very gotcha quotes where people can, you know, catch them in saying a comment that is defending one aspect of the conversation, not the other, and people will say like, this person is now anti-Black American, and it's being used to just sort of like allow people to confirm some pre-existing biases or just spread more misinformation. And with this, you know, Cynthia Erivo stuff coupled with that terrible clip from She's Gotta Have It season 2, it just really made that whole conversation very frustrating. For those of you who are unaware, there's this scene in She's Gotta Have It too where the main character Nola is having a conversation with an African artist, an African British artist, and he makes some comment about, you know, that Black, you know, British authors can play Black American roles better because they are like above, they're unshackled from the history. And Nola makes a comment about how, you know, the Black British people are colonized, like they're in love with their colonizer and some bullshit, and then they have sex. And then the author of that episode, who is a Black American man, made some really silly comments talking about how, like, you know, it was meant to create a dialogue, but there's no dialogue in it. It's just a lot of like anti-Black sentiment, in my opinion, especially because they make fun of Chiwetel Ejiofor and John Boyega by making fun of their Nigerian names, which has absolutely nothing to do with them being British, because there are like Nigerian Americans, not, and you know, that to me was just a big misstep. And again, these conversations are not conversations, they are clickbait meant to create diaspora wars instead of making like real conversation. And that's why it bothers me so much, because none of this is getting into the weedsiness of like why these conflicts exist. It just is knowing that there's a conflict and looking to perpetuate it by pitting Black people against each other when we're already fighting for so many other things and resources, and it's just deeply aggravating. With the issue of casting, you know, as someone who's first generation American of like West Indian descent, my mom is from Jamaica, my dad is from St. Lucia, I have kind of my own personal opinion on that kind of topic in general. For me, because my parents are so American, my mom has lived here since she's 6 years old, my dad's been here since he was 17, he came to America by joining the military, that I grew up with parents who were like very proud of their Caribbean and Black heritage, but were also just like, my mom watches Westerns, my mom's favorite shows are like Gunsmoke, Twilight Zone, Xena. So we just grew up, like, I grew up in a very Americanized environment. So for me, whenever I go to, like, I'm working on one of my other book projects after this one, is talking about touching on slavery in the Caribbean, which is something that I had to go out and learn a lot about because I didn't really have a narrative for it. I realized at a certain point, like 2 years ago, that when I thought about slavery, I could only ever see it in the Black American context, because as an American, that's what I grew up knowing. That's how I grew up learning about Blackness as myself. And I never really saw a real separation between the two. It also is probably because I grew up in Brooklyn, in New York City, which is a complete, you know, haven of immigrants. Most people I know, whether they're white or non-white, are immigrants. They're first generation American. I know a lot of, like, one of my partners right now is first generation American. Her mom is from Italy and her mom is from Ireland and her dad is from Italy. So I just know a lot of immigrant kids, and I feel like there's always this kind of disconnect between like living in the culture of your parents and being here in America. And because of that, I often feel like a culture vulture when I read about Caribbean stuff. Like, to me, it feels sort of like pageantry because I don't know a lot of things about it. And I'm working to, but like, I know Black history in terms of in the American context. Like, I spent most of my like academic stuff and doing stuff reading about that narrative. Like, the first book that I'm working on, that I'm finishing up, is about Black witches in the Jim Crow era, and I know that history and that subject matter and that sort of like miseducation fiction through the work of like, you know, Frances Harper and all those authors. I know that so clearly in my head, but I don't know it in the Caribbean context, and so I can feel like a culture vulture even though that technically is my culture. And to me, you know, I know that someone could come up who is like Black American or whatever and probably would be able to write a better Caribbean, more authentic Caribbean thing than I could if they were looking for that kind of pure authenticity. And so I just understand in my own perspective how complex being a Black person, no matter where you are in the diaspora, can be. There are plenty of things that I don't know. There are plenty of things that my parents don't know. Like, I had to tell my dad yesterday what the colors in the St. Lucian flag stood for, because in the St. Lucian flag, which looks like this, there's this white triangle that is, you know, on top of a Black triangle. And I was looking it up, and it's meant to represent the harmony between Blacks and whites. And I was just like, interesting. So I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, do you know what this means? And he was like, is it the Trinity? Because he thinks everything is fucking the Trinity. And I was like, no, it means this. And he's like, I never knew that. So like, even there are times where I'm teaching my parents about West Indian heritage and Jamaican culture and St. Lucian history, because for them, in the context of, you know, their reality with their cultures, they weren't really trying to like, they didn't know all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things I've learned from Joulzey is that the unfortunate thing about being part of a colonized group, being part of a, you know, an enslaved people, is that just because you have freedom or live in a majority Black country does not mean that you have the language, the tools, the history, or the, you know, emotional forsimilitude to want to find out all these things. Some of us are just trying to survive and get through the day. And so because of all that long-winded like little bleh, is why I do think it is more nuanced. And also, like, movies do not care about that when it comes down to it. Like, I think the only Welshman to ever play Henry Tudor was like my boy Richard Burton, and that was it. You know, like, he's been played by Irishmen, by all these other, you know, Anglo people. Like, you know, the guy who played Bruce Lee in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was Korean. No Cuban is on One Day at a Time. I don't think any of the actors were Venezuelan in Jane the Virgin. Like, I think that when it comes to the playing within your ethnicity thing, it's always been loosey-goosey. And I think when it comes to historical figures, there should be a little bit more attention paid to the significance of what that means, especially when it comes to someone like a Harriet Tubman, a Sojourner Truth. The person who's playing it should be someone who respects that person and looks like them, is not like, you know, fucking it up, because even with, you know, colorism, we gotta worry about that. And so those are the reasons why I think it needs to always be nuanced, and I just don't want to hold Black actors to a higher standard of authenticity and casting that no one else gets. I have the people on the CW playing American characters are Canadian, Australian, British, something else. So to me, I just don't want to hold our actors to that kind of standard if no one else is doing it. I think that we have enough standards that we are holding them to that are important, but that is my opinion. If you disagree, feel free. Just don't curse me out if you don't mind. Point blank, if you're depicting one of the most important Black American people, you shouldn't be going around liking tweets talking about how one group of Black people is jealous of another. Like, that's bullshit, you know? And I don't think that this means that this is the end of people playing people of different ethnicities. Like, Viola Davis is apparently in talks to be playing Shirley Chisholm, and nobody's mad about that. Even though Shirley Chisholm is like, you know, I believe she's of Bayesian descent. It's like, nobody cares, because Viola Davis is everyone's Black auntie. We stand, we love her, and we know she loves all of us too. It's about what you put out there. And I also think what's also important about this, and I'm going to do another video about like global Blackness, because I think that this ties into that as well. But we need to, like, the difficult thing about having these conversations on any platform is that because everyone has a voice, and everyone thinks their voice should be viewed equally. Everyone wants to be an intellectual on subject matters that they really know nothing about. And Twitter makes that the worst because everyone wants to just be part of a hive mind. And it's like, there are times where that hive mind is good and helps you learn things, but sometimes you're learning things that are not true. Like 1000% not true. Cleopatra was not black. Say it again. Cleopatra was not black. She's Ptolemy. Hate it. But getting back to this Harriet movie, there is another question that was brought up that I thought was really interesting about why is it that the first major movie about Harriet Tubman needs to have this backlash because of one actor. And at first I was like, what? And then I saw someone bring up Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot, I always go back and forth about how that should be pronounced. But, you know, she made some pro-IDF comments that really bothered people before Wonder Woman came out. And there are a lot of people who are like, well, Wonder Woman should be for everyone. This is problematic and everything and the like. But there are a lot of people, a lot of women especially, even women of color, who said that Wonder Woman's legacy and who Wonder Woman is as a character was more important than Gal Gadot. And to me, what makes me like, he's like, we can say that about a character like Wonder Woman. Like, we can say that Wonder Woman is more important than whoever's playing her, which I think was a great statement. That character is more important than whoever plays her. So why is that same consideration not given to Harriet Tubman in this context? And I personally don't have an answer for that. But I do think that we can sometimes hold ourselves to standards that are harder than other people. That's not a criticism, it's just a statement. And I think that when it comes to movies about slavery, I know a lot of people feel like they don't want to see that anymore. They don't really want to see movies about black trauma. And I think that that is something that I used to feel. I don't feel that way as much anymore, because as I've gotten older, I've realized how much I don't know about slavery and how much, like, I know about slavery, but like in terms of like seeing authentic depictions of it in media that are honest and true and not about white saviors is very, very limited compared to how many that we've had. And we also don't really have a lot of depictions of slavery outside of the American context of it. So even our visual narrative about slavery is very incomplete. And I think with Harriet Tubman, with Harriet Tubman in the Harriet movie, I feel like there is a way that we feel like we can dismiss female biographical histories of black women. And I'm not saying that that means that people should go see Harriet if they're upset about Cynthia Erivo's comments. What I am saying is that we allow problematic actors to portray characters that we love all the time. We've had problematic people portray historical people. I think that it is fair to say that, like, when you have a black female director, this is Black American director, mostly African American cast, that we should ask ourselves who is going to pay the price for this movie doing poorly and whose fault that is. For me, I don't want to make the director suffer for Cynthia Erivo's faults. That being said, I also do not think that we should shame people into spending their money on things they don't think are uplifting them, because we should be critical of the content that we get. I think that sometimes we can be too critical and use our taste as a level of quality, which is not the same thing. We can think something is corny, doesn't mean that it's bad, but I think that we should not be bullied into thinking that by not supporting Harriet that we're letting black women down, because that's unfair. Because terrible movies by white people get made every single year, and because they fail does not mean nothing else happens about it. Like, we should have 10 Harriet Tubman movies by now. We should have Celestial Journey of Truth movies by now. The fact that we don't is a failure of the industry, and we should not be forced to watch movies that we think are bad or that we don't like because we feel like they won't get made otherwise. That's not our problem. Like, and I think that we need to also stop uplifting artists that pretend to give us representation, and all they are doing is lining their pocket with black backing, with no intent of how they're putting our image out into the world. Like, I know that when Tyler Perry got that studio, like, even my mom was like, this is great, and like, I respect Tyler Perry in the sense that, like, his business acumen has put him into this position to create black work, but the images that he's put about black women and black queer people is bad. It's bad. And if he were black, you know, of West Indian descent, African descent, whatever, it would still be bad. And because we are in America and we have one of the biggest entertainment footprints, those images get put everywhere. And there is a result globally in terms of the global depiction of blackness that happens when we allow our image to be utilized to be anything and support it just because it's black, so therefore it must be good. Like, we can be critical about the thing. You know, I'm not saying that every Tyler Perry movie is bad. I'm not saying that, like, everything about it is wrong, but I'm saying there is a lot bad there, and just saying, well, he's a black man, we should support him because he's a black man, is a very, very weak reason to support anything in 2019 when there are so many black talented people who are trying to make their movies made, especially queer people in the black community, women in the black community, trying to get their shit made. We should not hold ourselves to zero standards. We have too many options now. I know some people don't like Issa Rae, but Issa Rae has been backing up a whole bunch of black businesses, a whole bunch of black entertainment people across the diaspora, regardless of how people think of her. And, like, that's what we should be caring about. Broad, different images of blackness being out there. Black Lady Sketch Show is bougie, but, like, that's something for somebody. And hopefully now we can have something that's a little bit less bougie. Like, I think the biggest things we need to worry about right now are creating better depictions of blackness that are thoughtful and interesting and not settle for just the scraps of the industry. And that's that on that. So thank you so much for watching this again. Like, subscribe, share, let me know what you thought. And so yeah, the Patreon is live now. Very excited about that, very nervous. As I said before, I have a video up about Titans, and I have a video up there about Harley Quinn being overexposed. And I will have those up on Patreon exclusively, and then I will release them later on next week. So that's kind of how it's gonna be. I'm gonna do, like, if you're a Patreon person, you'll get it a week early. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you soon. Bye.